This is for everyone who has one of these blasted things. It's a KWC M712 Schnellfeuer. Now, I read on certain forums that obviously the barrel, the outer barrel and both the inner barrel have quite a large amount of wobble to them. I opened it up to see what I could find and found that part of the reason is because the inner workings of the gun are in two halves and don't actually screw together. They rely on the pressure being forced when they are inside of the barrel, inside here at the front of the receiver. There's not much I can think to help with this apart from maybe some extremely thin form of tape or paper or something like that. But other than that, there's not much room for improvement there. A lot of parts, if you do have to open these up, be careful because the trigger is captive here, runs with the hammer, and opening it up will cause it to want to bow outwards. This tiny little spring here goes along there, there, and that will want to pop out at every single chance it gets. I'm dreading putting this back together because Christ knows how I'm gonna have to force it back in, but the barrel has to go into a certain angle because it has this little notch type thing on the end of the rubber sealant piece, and it just pops in like that. Part of the reason why it's so inaccurate. The trigger, this spring is it's an okay spring. It just loops around this tiny little notch there and sort of sits over like so, that little under bit there, and that just sits here, and that's fine. On the other side of this main assembly, I'll have to stop it, put everything back together and flip it over because otherwise everything will fall out. But once I've done that, I'll be right back. But just for now, yep, the bolt, it has two like little washer type things, one right there. These are two springs. There's a fairly large and soft one there and an extremely firm short one here. And there's a washer that goes between these two there and at the end there. This is the main bolt. This should stay together at all times unless you're extremely rough with it. This is the piece that holds everything together, it goes straight through the bolt, simple enough. And that's the screw that holds the trigger on place here. And this goes through the bolt. Both of these, that's just a spacer plate, but it sits in the bolt like so. So you pull this piece out with a Allen key, Allen wrench or whatever it is, and then you have to prise it out, you pull it back and try and twist it out like that. At least that's how I had to get mine out, both of them together. I would say try and be careful, but obviously they're fairly large, so you have a very small chance of losing them. But yes, I'll be right back. A quick side note, this little spring here for what I believe would be the safety sits underneath and is quite the fiddly little bastard, so be wary of that when you pull it together, pull it apart or put it back together or what have you. Yep. Another quick side note, whilst trying to put this together, this little spring here and this whole entire small gas assembly type thing, it constantly wants to be popped off due to the pressure exerted by the hammer, but unfortunately to push it back against the hammer puts pressure on this spring here, which tends to want to fly off into your face, and that's not very pleasant to say the least. So yes, be wary of this as well. Right, okay, I'm back after about an hour or so of fiddling. Please note the tiny itsy bitsy little spring that's about here is extremely difficult to get back in when placing the other side of the plate on, and has the potential to fly out once you let it go and disappear for about half an hour, where if you shake that piece it will suddenly fly back out. I went through the process of trying to manufacture my own spring. It didn't work, but huzzah, I finally found it. Now the piece I was talking about is this. All it does is actuate, just ride like that, and there is a coiled spring that goes I think roughly around here, coils round once, comes back and then sits on the little peg here. You can just see the top of the spring if I... there. That spring, this whole piece in fact, has a tendency to jump off this little peg. Bear in mind it's not very thick, and from what I can tell it's part of the mechanism that allows for fully automatic control. Now about a month ago I was fiddling about, this plate came off, the proper spring that was behind fucked off somewhere, and I've never been able to find it since. It's just gone. So luckily I found some welding wire. Well, I say found. I got some welding wire out the garage, managed to kind of jury rig a spring, but unfortunately it doesn't quite have the pressure that the last one did. It does work, but I found on fully automatic usage the hammer doesn't cock. It goes back and then just falls forward after about 18 rounds or so. So not completely noticeable, but a minor annoyance until I'm able to either A, manufacture a proper spring from steel, or just don't use fully automatic. I mean, it's not exactly tactically viable or anything, but either way. So yes, be wary of this. Even with all of these pieces on, that has a tendency to come off. But I'm not going to touch it anymore because I've done it before. But yes, that is the piece that you should look for. I know of one other person that had this trouble, but they found the spring. So just be wary and be careful. Now the bolt, to reassemble the bolt, this whole entire piece needs to go in as one. You can't put one in and then the other. It has to go in as one complete piece. So make sure you've got your two washers, the two springs, everything. Pick it up. Trigger needs to be back. Hammer, apologies. This is quite difficult with one hand, surprisingly. Who would have guessed? But yes, so all in as one, and there should be two little rails, of which are very difficult to see about there, that fit on the inside of this bolt piece here. There's one. They need to fit underneath, and that's what allows the bolt to reciprocate on a track. So yep, that whole entire bolt needs to be as one. You put the bolt in, then put these two there in front, well, get the frame on first. Actually, yeah, get the frame on first. Bolt, frame, then you put these two in, then that through afterwards, and then screw it back in and put your entire upper receiver back in together, and you're done.